We can't see.
Good afternoon and welcome to our podcast. Our podcast today focuses on assessment. In our presence is Ms. Sherry Diana Ryan, Ms. Monique Monroe, Ms. Alicia Khan, Ms. Devya Naurang, Ms. Mala Devi Sukdeo, Ms. Gomati Jairam, Ms. Jaiwati Ramo, Ms. Sita Harinarayan, Ms. Alia Prasad, and yours truly, Ms. Salome Singh. Our target or main objective in today's podcast is to expand our knowledge and assessment used in schools, mainly in the early childhood or nursery level. In every nursery school in Guyana, each child upon entering the school must complete a diagnostic assessment that is prepared by the Ministry of Education. So why does teachers and learners need to complete this diagnostic assessment? This diagnostic, after completion and being analyzed, gave teachers a sense of starting point at which the learner comes to us with. It is a measure of the learner's prior knowledge and misconceptions that they hold before they begin learning and what we as teachers have to teach them. Moving on, we will now be discussing the differences between the diagnostic assessment, the formative assessment, and the summative assessment. I invite Ms. Sita Harinarayan to have a presentation done on this.
So I'm Sita Harinarayan, and I'll talk about the differences between the three types of assessment. And the three types of assessment are assessment as learning, assessment for learning, and assessment of learning. So let's look at the first one, assessment as learning. It's also called the diagnostic assessment. It is a form of pre-assessment where teachers can evaluate students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills before their instruction. Diagnostic assessments are a set of written questions, multiple choice, or short answers that assess a learner's knowledge. Based our current views or on a topic issue to be studied, it also develops and supports students' metacognitive skills. This form of assessment is helping students becoming lifelong learners. As students engage in peer and self-assessment, they'll learn to make sense of information, relate it to peer knowledge, and use it for new learning. Students develop a sense of ownership, and when they use teacher, peer, and self-assessment feedback to make adjustments, involvement, and changes to what they understand. Let's look at the second one. So the second assessment is assessment for learning, which is also called the formative assessment. The philosophy behind the formative assessment is that assessment and teaching should be integrated into a whole. The power of such an assessment doesn't come from intricate technology or from using a specific assessment instrument. It comes from recognizing how much learning is taking place in the common task of a school day and how much insight into student learning teachers can mine from this material. Assessment for learning is an ongoing assessment that allows teachers to monitor students to a day-to-day basis and modify their teaching based on what the student need to be successful. This assessment provides teachers with the timely specific feedback that they need to make adjustment to their learning. After teaching a lesson, we need to determine whether the lesson was accessible to all students while still challenging to more capable what students learned and still need to know. And the last one is assessment of learning, which is called summative assessment. Summative assessment is a snapshot in time that lets the teacher, student, and their parents know how well each student has completed the learning tasks and activities. It provides information about student achievement while it provides useful reporting information. It often has a little effect on learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sita. Anybody else have anything to add to what Ms. Sita has shared there?
Yes, to add to what Ms. Tita just said, my understanding on all of the three types of assessment, diagnostic, firstly, this helps to identify the child's background. Formative assessment, this is an ongoing assessment that you can do on a day-to-day basis or even weekly. If you finish a topic, you can assess the child on that. And summative assessment, this can happen at the end of the school term, where you ask them about all the topics you did and you go through if you did letters, numerals, and whatever, you can assess the child at the end of the term. So for the tree assessment, that is what I understand.
Yes, totally agree with you, Miss Alicia. Yes, as we said, and as seen in this Venn diagram here, we see that the diagnostic assessment is basically the preparation stage. It prepares the learners for whatever it is that we have to teach them. The formative assessment as well, it says that it's the improving stage. That is where we prepare them before for what is going to be taught. And the summative assessment is basically considered a judgmental assessment because this is what determines the children and how much they would have acquired, how much knowledge they would have acquired during the period of what they have learned. And at the end of it, then we judge them according to that. Very good. So moving on, we are going to go ahead now. So according to an article, the National Tests and Diagnostic Feedback titled What Teachers Say in Trinidad and Tobago, Sandel, 1989, of page 119 wrote that the critical importance of assessment is the potential for student learning. And this is dependent on the purpose of the assessment and how the information that emerges from the assessment is interpreted and put to use, bringing about the improvement. So for me as a teacher, right, I think that this diagnostic assessment is a very effective tool when it comes to assessment, especially when it comes to reading and writing. And it fits the description of the importance of assessment according to Sandel 1989. Reason being, as a teacher, at the end of the assessment, you know where you stand in the classroom with each child. You know what to expect from each child when you are ready to teach reading and writing from the result gathered from the diagnostic assessment. Because in the nursery level, we don't really do a quiz or a test, except if it's done orally. But then, even if you do, you wouldn't really have anything to base that information on. But after gathering information from a diagnostic assessment, an action plan, or what we also know as a support plan, is being prepared. And from there, we can identify the child's weak areas or his or her strength, and we can plan or we can come up with strategies that will improve the child. Isn't that so? What do you think about that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I also think that the diagnostic assessment is a very important tool since it is intended to help teachers to identify what students know and what they do not know, and the areas in which we can help them to improve in.
Yes, Ms. Monique, absolutely agreed with you. So we can go ahead now. So can anybody share their critical viewpoint on the reading assessment and its role in Guyana school? Because we know that these assessment is it plays a very important role when it comes to us in the classroom and the school. So is there anyone who would like to talk about the reading assessment and the role it plays in Guyana school?
The reading assessment is an important assessment as well, since it helps to give an understanding of the level that the children are when engaging in their literacy activities.
Absolutely agree. Yes. Good. So as we are talking about diagnostic assessment, we are going to use a sample of a diagnostic assessment that we use in school, and we are going to look at it. We are going to make our judgments on the assessment. And so I'm going to share with you a few of what have been gathered, and let's talk about it. So this diagnostic assessment that I'm going to share with you here, it's basically covering the reading and writing aspect of the assessment, right? So here we have, this is the lowercase letter. This is the lowercase letter assessment, where we assess the children to see, or I should say learners, to see how well they know the letters, right? Because we know that if they cannot identify the letter, cannot identify the sound and so on, they wouldn't be able to read. More likely they would not be able to read, right? So this is a part of the assessment that covers lowercase letters, and we have uppercase letters. And as we can see here, this is how the diagnostic is normally done, right? The uppercase letters, and here we have another sample of the letter sound, right? And I think we should take a look at this letter sound here, because it is something I would consider very important as teachers when it comes to teaching reading and writing in our classroom. And so this here is the autobiographical knowledge. As we know, this is as well very important to our children when it comes to having them answering questions and knowing about themselves. And the final one is when it comes to the writing aspect of it, where they start with writing your name and being able to draw themselves. And so this is a sample of diagnostic assessment. So now that we would have had a view of the assessment, I think we can be able now to go ahead and make some judgments on it. So let's go ahead and discuss now about the action plan, because we know from that diagnostic there, we see how each child performed, and then we have to do an action plan. Isn't that so?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So we are going to talk about the action plan now. So I would like everybody to, make a contribution. Let's see how we use this action plan. So we're going to discuss what is an action plan. We can discuss some advantages and disadvantages of an action plan. So over to you, teachers.
Okay, so what I understand from the action plan is that it is the final core component of the classroom behavior management, and it also tells us how we should plan our activities and the procedures and the rules. Also, what should be done and how it should be done.
I agree with Ms. Monique. I think having an action plan or the support plan is very important because it is a comprehensive tool to track the strengths and weaknesses of the learners. Now, when we create this action plan, we can use it to implement various learning strategies that will help our learners develop and progress. For example, when carrying out the previously mentioned diagnostic assessment, it will help you to know what knowledge your learners possess. Not only will this diagnostic assessment help you to figure out which areas your learners are strong in and which areas they may be weak in, but having an action plan will allow you to plan activities to help them become successful in their academic life.
Yes.
I agree with Ms. Terry.
I agree with Ms. Sherry too, because after all, an action plan is a detailed plan outlining action needed to reach one or more goals. Alternatively, it can, as in sequence of steps must be taken or activities must be performed well, things like that. So I agreed.
Yes, I agree with Ms. Sita Harinarayan because an action plan provides instructional support and is a comprehensive way to monitor change and progress across a variety of objectives and goals within areas like the classroom. And
I agree
students.
also because an action plan are useful because they give you a framework for thinking about how we are going to complete the diagnostic. They help us to finish activity in a sensible order and help us to ensure that we don't miss any key step that we need to be done.
Absolutely.
I also agree because it also provides you with a clear timings so you can plan your activities and ensure it's completed within a specific time.
Yes, agreed. Yes. So as we would have talked about the action plan there, we all know how important an action plan is for us. So with me, I have an action plan here that was planned with those diagnostic results. So I did not cover all of the areas in the action plan. So I just have one here that covers the basic part of it. So let's look at this action plan. Let's debate on it a little. Let's see if this is an action plan that, according to Sandel, we can use it to bring about improvement. So we have the child here. As we can see, she was a part of the class. And so some of her strengths that were identified, as seen here, is that she had a fair knowledge of her letters and sound, right? As we would have seen up here. Let's go back to her. So her sound, and this is this child here, Tanuja Narayandat. We see that out of the 26 sound, her letters, she was able to identify all 26 letters of the alphabet. So her strengths were well identified, don't you think
Yes,
so?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yes, I think
Yes.
so.
Good. And a next trend that was identified when it comes to writing is that she could have hold the instrument formally. And let's see here, by looking at the way she's writing here, do you think that she was able to hold the instrument, the pencil, formally? Yes, I think so, right?
Yes, I think
So,
she was able to.
so let's look at the weakness here now. So it says here that the child responded mostly in one word to the question asked. And we saw that here in her autobiographical knowledge, right? Most of her questions she would have answered in a one word. And secondly, the child showed no sign of letter formation skill. And we can see that here. You can see the way she wrote her A wasn't in the correct formation, right? You can see there that it's something like an O and then it came down. And look at her N and look at the T, right? So the uppercase letter is not as how it's supposed to be. So we would have identified those strengths and weakness from her. So let's look at the strategy, because we say the action plan is what we plan to improve, help the child to improve, right? So the strategies that we have here is engaging child in discussion, emphasizing full sentence structure responses. Do you think that this is an appropriate strategy to assess the child, or that will help the child to improve in answering questions fully or in a complete sentence? Do you think that this strategy applies to that?
Yes, I totally
Yes.
agree with that strategy.
I agree with you.
Yes, and then secondly, we have that we're going to encourage the parents to do same at home. Do you think this also applies, or this will bring about in the improvement in this child weak area?
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
it would help the child.
Agree.
I agree with that also.
Because as much as we teachers try, sometimes that child need the parents to encourage them. And that's where they will get this confident and like they will be able to do their work and get everything done in time and stuff.
Yes, you are so correct, Miss Sita. And you know, as much as teachers, we can try at school and we can prompt them to keep answering questions in a complete sentence. And when they go home, they don't do the same, you know, it kind of, you know, push them back from that, right? So yes, I agree as well. I think the strategies will help. It will bring about improvement. So when we're ready to do the post-diagnostic, I think that we will be able to see a result in the child answering these questions using a full response. Secondly, the weakness says here that the child showed no sign of letter formation skills. So the strategy that was implemented here, it says that we're going to involve the child in more activities geared to develop fine muscles, example, shading, tracing, modeling, etc. And we can encourage the parent to use other online teaching applications that will assist the child in correct letter formation. And when we are talking about online application, we're talking like, you know, this ABC learning app they have that teaches the children how to form letters correctly. What do you think about this teaching strategy? Do you think this strategy is going to implement or is going to bring about improvement in the weak area of this child here?
I agree with you with this strategy because getting the child to trace and develop their muscle will improve their letter formation skills.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with her too.
I also agree because most of the activity that we have here, the children would get excited to do it. That would motivate them to, participate, and the activities will help them to develop their fine motor skills.
Yes, miss, absolutely. But do you think there could have been probably another strategy? Can you come up or can you think of any other strategy that can be used or that could have been used in this action plan that is going to assist children with letter formation?
Yes, I think they could have been given a worksheet or an activity to trace instead of an online game.
They could also paint within outlines of letters. They can also write it in the sand tray that we have.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Yes, they could. Yes, and so here we can see that this when we are doing this action plan, I think as teachers, we really need to sit and go through all of these strategies, because if we don't, as Sandal would have explained, if we don't see and set our action plan or support plan to bring about improvement for the assessment, then it makes no sense that we do an assessment, right? And so I thank you teachers so much for your contribution on this. I totally agree with all of you. And so us moving on, we since we would have been able to compare the information about the action plan, yes, when we compare the action plan, we see its purpose. We see that the purpose of the action plan was achieved, and we see that it did indeed. It caters for the needs of the child, and it was feasible. It guarantees improvement of the child. So do you think that the action plan or the support plan serves any purpose? And why do you think so?
Yes, I think that it serves a purpose because the action plan provides instructional support and it is a comprehensive way to monitor change and progress across a variety of objectives and goals within the classroom.
Okay, yes, miss, you are correct on that. I agree with you there.
I agree with Ms. Monique too because the action plan help you to track the strengths and weaknesses of the learners.
Absolutely. All right, so yes, indeed, the action plan, it serves a purpose. Without the action plan, it makes no sense that we even do a diagnostic assessment, because what are we doing with the information that we would have gotten from the diagnostic assessment, right? So yes, I think the action plan serves its purpose. And how do you think the outcome of the assessment can be linked to a student classroom profiling? Because as we know, that the classroom profiling or the classroom student profiling is basically the process which enables us as teachers to reflect upon the effect of the teaching and the learning styles that we employ in our classroom. So how do you think this outcome of the assessment can be linked to this profiling?
Well, I think that a system of well-constructed formative and summative assessment allow students to demonstrate their ability and knowledge and reflect how close they are to meeting the educational goals and standards. And so it is evident that from the assessments, learners can directly benefit.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, the student learning outcomes specify what a student should know or be able to do at the end of a term or the school year. So the student learning outcome assessment provides information that puts students learning at the forefront of academic planning process. It might be challenging to connect a curriculum outcome or lesson objective to an assessment. So you as a teacher should ask yourself, am I implying that learners should be able to recollect facts if my aim is for them to comprehend a concept? Or do I want them to apply knowledge that they may possess? You should consider whether your assessments are connected to the objectives of the lesson or the course. For example, are they determining whether students have attained the learning objectives? Good. So from here, you can be able to plan for the learners since they all learn differently. So the same learning strategies that might work for one might not work for everyone. So you need to figure out how the children learn and in what way. Only then you will be able to plan activities to suit each learner's needs.
Agree, Miss.
Yes, I also agree with that. Yes. So with the using this diagnostic assessment, the outcome of the diagnostic assessment, we as teachers are able to reflect on it, and we are able to employ strategies in our classroom with the assessment. So teachers, I must thank you so much for being present in today's podcast. I know that we have learned a lot about assessment, and I know that it will benefit all of us because we are going to be able to get in our classroom and we are going to be using these same techniques on assessment in our classroom. So I thank you once again for participating in today's podcast, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
You're welcome, Miss. Thank you.
You're welcome, Miss. Thank you. And I must say I enjoyed this afternoon. It was very informative and I learned so much, like so much. I got her all. I'll take it in my classroom. Thank you.
You're welcome. Miss.
Thank you. And I must say the same. I've learned a lot and gained a lot from this podcast.
Thank you, Miss.
Same here.
Same here, Miss. Thank you.